And welcome back to Pizza Class. Today we're going to talk about the classic cheese and pepperoni New York style pizza. And to do that, we've got to talk first about our equipment and our ingredients. So for equipment, it's fairly simple, as are many of our other pizzas. We have a pizza screen. We have that to stretch the pizza onto. Again, if you're using a brick oven or a Blackstone pizza oven, for example, you would use a peel instead, but we're going to use a pizza screen for this video. You'll need a cheese grater. I like the coarse type of cheese grater like this that has the larger holes in it so that our mozzarella has nice big slivers of cheese. We're going to grate our cheese. A metal bowl to mix our sauce in, and that's about it for this pizza. So let's talk next about our ingredients. Again, very, very basic. This is going to be the video where I explain how to make my basic traditional New York style pizza sauce, and it's going to be based, like I said, in my ingredient essentials, on this can of blended tomatoes. This is Escalon 6-in-1. I like to use this size can and use the entire can as the base of my sauce for my pizza. So we're going to go ahead and open that in a second. And next we have some pretty much basic pepperoni here we can use for this pizza. Here's our Galbani mozzarella cheese, which is just a block of whole milk mozzarella, a block that we're going to shred before we prepare the pizza. And then we've got the ingredients for our sauce. You got 1 teaspoon of oregano, heaping teaspoon, a little more than a teaspoon of basil. Those are both dried. 1/4 teaspoon of black ground pepper. This is 1 tablespoon of table sugar, normal sugar. And here's just about 1/2 teaspoon of salt that we'll be using, sea salt that we'll be using in the sauce, and a little bit of water that's warmed up, and I'll explain that in a second. My sauce is pretty basic. Now you don't need to even use all these different ingredients. Sometimes just these tomatoes by themselves are tremendous on a pizza, but I like to put a little spices in the sauce for a couple of reasons. Flavor, of course, but also I like the way it looks when you're blending those together. So and I'm a little bit of a fan of a slightly sweeter sauce, which is why I've got sugar here. You don't need to use sugar. The tomatoes are pretty sweet on their own, but adding a little bit of sugar in the way that I do seems to be a hit with the people that I serve it to. We've got our sauce there. We're going to go ahead and pour that whole can into a bowl, which will be where we mix our sauce together. I like to just scoop every little bit of that tomato out of there, and once you taste these tomatoes you'll understand why we don't like to waste. So get all that sauce out of there, and we'll combine our dry ingredients with this. So there's just our base tomatoes. You can see the consistency of them. They're well blended. They're very good, just like this. They should be nice, rich, and dark red, which is a good sign of deliciousness. So next we're going to add in our dry basil. Go ahead and just sprinkle that in. Our oregano. Again, I mostly use that for texture and just a slight flavor. Our ground pepper. And our salt. Minced garlic. Now this is up to you. I like to use a lot. I like to use a tablespoon or 2. So I combine those together. Just gonna blend that in there. Just like that. Start to bring them all together. And let me explain how I like to mix sugar in. I used to just dump the sugar in with the other dry ingredients. But I learned a little trick that some chefs use, which is turning the sugar into a mixture with a little bit of water. So almost like a syrup. That allows the sugar to begin to dissolve before it gets into the sauce. So I'll just stir that up. And as soon as I start to see the granules of sugar disappear, then that's when I add the sugar water into the sauce. Again, that's not a necessary step. I like to do that. It also adds just a little bit of liquidity to my sauce. Gives me just a little extra than what the tomatoes came with. I like a loose sauce on my pizza. It's easier to spread, and it lasts a little longer. I can get more pizzas out of it if there's just a little bit of water in there. This sauce can go in the refrigerator for days, and it'll last you through your whole batch of pizza. dough that you've made. So we can put this in a container and store that in the refrigerator, no problem at all, once it's opened. And that'll be a tremendous base for lots of recipes that you have involving traditional pizza sauce. So next up is our cheese. Again, we're going to use the grater for this with the large holes, our whole milk mozzarella cheese, and I'm just going to peel that out. You can see the pieces of cheese coming off of there. A hand grating cheese, you can't beat it. It keeps the moisture that came with the block of cheese, and it just allows that aroma even to come into the process. I just love it. And lots of people like to run up and grab cheese right out of the bowl. Freshly grated mozzarella cheese is wonderful. So for a single pizza, I'm probably going to use just about half of this block, maybe a little more. Sometimes I'll grate a little more than I need, or else I'll just grate the whole block and keep it stored. But again, once it's grated, it starts to lose moisture immediately, and we don't want that. We want to keep some of that cheese moisture because some of the flavor is connected with that, and that's about enough for one New York style pizza. And then of course pepperoni doesn't need much prep, but we just have a little bowl of pepperoni there. I will give you one tip about pepperoni, separating them a little bit beforehand. Keep them cool right up until they're going on the pizza so they're easier to spread out. They don't stick together. You have a little bit easier time with them on the pizza. And we're ready to begin working with our dough ball for this New York style pizza. So again, like to keep our Puto double loaf flour nearby. And here's a dough ball that we made 2 days ago, and it's ready for us to go ahead and use. It's had time to rise. You can see even the cell structure in that dough. Wonderful, feels great, looks great. And I always like to tap that into the flour there, get us some surface to work on. You can even begin to see these bubbles just forming. This is a great looking dough for a pizza, and it's been brought to room temperature, so we're sure that it's going to bake well. And we go around the edges like we showed in other videos to form that crust edge. Just watch those large bubbles. They tend to create problems in the oven. Some people like them. Once we get that dough formed around the outside edge as a crust, we're ready to start working that in our hand. Now, this is where you just have to be careful to evenly work the dough, stretching that outer edge, just trying not to touch it, and get ready to place this pizza on our 16-inch pizza screen. So this is a dough ball that's about 310 grams, so it's going to be slightly smaller than a 16-inch dough ball. 16-inch pizza, but we're stretching that dough out with the tops of our hands, gently forming a fist, and you could just see the thinness of this wonderful pizza dough. There we go. Now a little trick, if you want, you can let that dough sort of loosen itself up a bit. If your crust thickness is too thin, I can almost see through that. So I'm just going to let that slack up a bit. Make a slightly smaller pizza, but I'll get a little bit of a thicker crust on the bottom of the slice. So there we go, ready to sauce that. I'll just put a few spoonfuls of this sauce. You don't need a lot. A lot of people over sauce their pizza. The sauce is so powerful, the tomato is so powerful, that you really don't need a lot. You should be able to almost see through the sauce on the base of a pizza to the crust. That way it won't be too soggy, it won't create a soggy crust, and you'll get the flavor that you're after, even though sometimes it's counterintuitive. So I like to just make an even spread like that. You can sort of see how that is looking. And it's time for our cheese. So we'll take our fresh grated mozzarella cheese and just first work our way around the edge. I like to do that because I make sure that I tie the crust of the pizza to the sauce and we get a nice rim of cheese around, and then I'll finish up on the inside. Doesn't matter, have fun with it. It's your pizza. That's the best part of all of this. So that's just about enough cheese. You can barely see through it. For a cheese pizza, you might want a little more if that's the only topping you're going to go with. But since we're going to put a little pepperoni on there, we're going to stop right there. And we've got that looking just about like that. We're ready to throw some pepperoni on there. Now, again, speed is important here if you're using a peel. I'm not. I'm using a screen so I can take my time. In fact, sometimes screens are great. You can line pizzas up. So you can have, while one is in the oven, you could be working on the next one. And you don't have to worry about trying to find a place to put the pizza before the oven is ready for it. So we got just enough pepperoni slices there to spread it out just a little bit. And this pizza is ready for the oven. Okay, so we're at our oven, and this oven's been preheated for well over an hour to 485 degrees at least. I like that. It gives a nice 8 to 10 minute bake, so that's just about right for this traditional style pepperoni pizza. And we'll put that in just like that and close the door and keep it closed for the entire time that it's in the oven. We don't want to keep opening the door, allowing the heat out. So we're going to leave that in there, set a timer for 8 minutes, check on it at that point. We'll see you in a few. Okay, so our pizza's been in the oven for just about 8 minutes. We're ready to take it out and check on it here. Oh, lovely. That looks perfectly done. As you can see, the pizza is just bubbling on top from the sauce and cheese mixing together there. Lovely brown crust all around the edge. And that guy is ready to eat. So we're gonna take it over here to the table. So you can see the bottom of the crust is just perfectly brown. This thing is perfectly done. We're gonna go ahead and you should hear a crisp crunch as you go through that with a rocker knife or a roller cutter. When the pizza's done properly, you should hear it. So there's our classic New York style, traditional sauce pizza crust. That's going to be just delicious in a minute after this cools off. I hope you enjoyed making a traditional New York style pepperoni pizza with pizza class.